I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is David Aaker.
We now live in such a hostile communication environment. There's information overload, there's media clutter, and there's widespread skepticism. It's really hard. So what that has meant is that the way you build a brand now is really changed in 11 years. The role of conventional media is grossly declined, even social media. So you have to look at other ways to build a brand.
David Aaker is the Vice Chairman of Profit and Professor Emeritus at the BerkeleyHaas School of Business. He has published over 120 articles and 18 books that have sold well over 1 million copies and have been translated into 18 languages. They include Managing Brand Equity, Creating Signature Stories, The Future of Purpose-Driven Branding, and Aaker on Branding, which is now in its 2nd edition. Called the father of modern branding by Phil Kotler, his work has received 160,000 citations, and we're thrilled to chat with him once again here at the On Brand podcast. My interview with David's coming right up, but first...
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Quick question. How confident are you that your content actually connects in every market? If you're guessing, it might be time to check out Phrase. Phrase is the industry-leading AI localization platform that helps you deliver content in multiple languages without losing your tone, your message, or your mind. It automates the manual work, slashes review time, and gives you real data on what's working where. Brands like Uber and Zendesk trust Phrase to scale their content across the globe and get it right every time. If you're serious about reaching more people and driving better results internationally, head over to phrase.com/MPN and take a look. That's phrase.com/MPN. David Aaker, welcome back to On Brand.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here. I was looking at your list of guests, and I'm in good company.
You know, I feel like if we listen to past episodes, I probably made this joke the last time you were on, but you keep doing such fascinating work, as your bio is a testament to, and with so many great books, works, articles. What made you revisit Aaker on Branding?
Well, it was 11 years ago that I wrote that book. It was really... I at that time had 6 branding books, and they were overwhelming, and so I created this book in part for the Profit staff, but also for others that really would like to see the scope of my work in a more manageable thing. So it's kind of the Reader's Digest version, but that's 11 years ago, and since then I've had occasion to observe the difference, and really what I've concluded is that the challenges are kind of the same, but they've been amplified greatly. And there's 2 in particular. One is the fact that we are living in a hyper dynamic environment, driven by disruptive innovations at a pace and a speed and an impact that we've never seen before. And so that really changes branding a lot in a couple of ways. One, branding has a lot to do with successful disruptive innovation. It's a little known fact, I might add. most disruptors think that branding is something tactical that we'll deal with at the launch, but it's so important to manage the disruptive brand itself and to position it so it wins, and that means to elevate the must-haves that are the basis of the disruptive. And the second thing, it needs to create barriers. And branding the innovation is one of the barriers, and sort of allowing the disruptive innovation to evolve over time so it's a moving target is another. And the second thing is that we now live in such a hostile communication environment. There's information overload, there's media clutter, and there's widespread skepticism. It's really hard. So what that has meant is that the way you build a brand now is really changed in 11 years. And the role of conventional media is grossly declined. Even social media that has turned out to be messier and more expensive than we thought is 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 no longer viewed as sort of the answer. So you have to look at other ways to build a brand. Things like signage and radio, things like um, uh, brand communities, things like events like FedEx Cup or something like that. And those take on much greater importance because they all sort of basically nullify skepticism and that kind of thing, and they are where the people are. And I'll add podcasts to that list. I mean, podcasts like yours now are vehicles to reach people that you just can't do any other way.
That's so important, what you said, too, because I feel like revisiting anything, looking back, it does feel like this marketing ecosystem that we find ourselves in is just, we've been grappling with over the past several decades, this increase in noise. And I think the easy answer, the quick answer is, oh, there's just more of it. But I think that lens of skepticism that you just talked about is really an important thing not to miss, because I think it feels easy and addressable to say there's just more noise, but it's not just more noise. And I think talking about some of those strategic insights that we can use to address skepticism, because that feels like a big challenge and not one that's easy always to put a Band-Aid on.
Well, I think the key to that is to divert attention from what's causing the skepticism. And there's one subject that's a favorite of both you and I, and that's storytelling. And if you can get a signature stories, that was the subject of my book, Creating Signature Stories. But if you can get a signature story that that's so familiar, you just dredge up some symbol or hint of the story, and everybody gets it, and everybody changes sort of their perspective. A book that's influenced me more than others is by a guy named George Lakoff, a linguist at Berkeley, who wrote a book, Don't Think of an Elephant.
Yeah.
And he made the point that it's not the quality of the argument that wins a day. It's the person that decides what the argument is about, and how it's framed, and what perspective you enter the argument. Now, if you're going to talk about tax relief or pro-abortion, the argument's over. It doesn't matter how solid your facts and figures are. You're done. So you've got to frame the discussion, and a story is one way to do that. And but also, if you talk about the FedEx Cup, or if you talk about the Harley brand Hogs, their brand community, there's no skepticism anymore. You don't argue against a story, and you don't argue against especially if the story is animated, I should say, or we used to say in advertising, if you have nothing to say, sing it. But anyway, if you have one of those kinds of techniques that are working well, then you don't. Skepticism just doesn't exist. They're diverted away from what they're liable to be skeptical about.
That's such an important frame in thinking about all of this in terms of skepticism, because I feel like another thing that we kind of get lost thinking about is authenticity, which is important, but I think sometimes we can get to navel gazing on how we can be authentic when we forget the fact that the need for that is because of the level of skepticism in the audience today. So you brought up your previous book, Signature Stories, another great one. So if someone is thinking about, okay, I'm on board with what David's talking about, how do I get one of these signature stories for my brand? Is there an easy, quick start guide answer to someone on that?
One of the really wake up calls for me is it's actually happened with all my books, because I make an argument that is so sound, people nod their heads, and we're going to do this going forward, and they don't do it. It's just mind-blowingly frustrating. I've occurred that my last 3 books all were in that category, and signature stories. Everybody agrees that storytelling is powerful. Everybody agrees they remember stories, they don't remember facts. Everybody agrees that when somebody says, I have a story, a speaker says, I have a story, their ears perk up. Everybody agrees with that. And so then they go back to their office, and it turns out that stories are hard to come by. And it's just a really a story that merits being a signature story, that merits having a long life, is hard to find. And also, and when you do find one, it slips through your fingers. You don't have any mechanism in the organization to grab it, and you don't have any mechanism to tell it professionally. And these people that are running organizations are very good at what they do, but they're not people that were trained to find stories. They're not trained to tell stories. They're not trained to do a professional video or something that, and then to find a way to distribute that video. It's just a skill set they simply don't have. There's one exception. The B2B companies are very good at finding stories, and so the company I'm associated with, we have 100 user stories of all kinds, and they're all dumbed down. They're all made to fit on a one-page format. They're all meant to just say that we did this, and aren't we great? And our client thought, oh, this was a wonderful thing. They've taken out all the tension. They've taken all the character advice. They've taken all the aha moments that made that story exciting. It's all gone. They've dumbed it down, and I think they did that because they don't understand storytelling and presenting stories, and they're afraid the client might be offended by saying that they were so dumb that they had to be in a situation that required a change. I don't know. And sometimes the clients think, oh, this is a secret because we developed this and we don't want others to know about it because they might copy it, which is stupid. But anyway, it turns out that it's really, I give talks for big organizations on how storytellers is your answer, and they all nod their head and don't do it. And then I wrote a book on purpose-driven branding, which I said, if you want to have a spend money wisely in the social sphere. Grants, volunteering, energy goals. They're all the same as everybody else. They're not visible. They're not interesting. They're not communicatable. You need signature stories. You need a program. It could be an adopted nonprofit or it could be one you develop, but you need a signature program that'll do that. And if you do, you will elevate your brand, business brand. It'll get energy. It'll give an image lift. It'll get engagement, things that you need and you can't get any other way. And people nod their head. And I tell the nonprofits I work with, I say, stop asking for money and ask to be adopted as a signature story. And that's right. It's not easy. It's very frustrating. It doesn't get done. And one reason it's not easy to do. It's not easy for a firm to find some nonprofit to adopt that's just right, that will cover a broad spectrum of the audience, and you often need more than one. I mean, look at the home run that FedEx has, but it still doesn't reach a whole audience. It reaches maybe half the audience, and so the other half that could care less about golf is not there. So there's that, and then even when you get them to find a way to fully exploit it, to really make a commitment, a long-term commitment, to have passion, to be a thought leader, it's just not easy to find something that will work for you. So anyway, and those are two examples of cases that I think we know what to do, but getting it done is, yeah. And then I thought we won the battle. The brand is an asset, and you shouldn't engage in price promotions anymore. That's going to be destructive to the brand. And here we are. We now have demand marketing and performance marketing, or what do you call it? But it's basically, let's do something to get short-term sales or leads or whatever, or clicks. Yeah. And so even that thing, that the war that was won is teetering again.
On Brand will be right back after this.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Why does the United States pay higher drug prices than other countries? Because America's the only country in the world where 340B hospitals mark up drug prices and PBM middlemen charge billions in hidden fees. Meanwhile, Americans subsidize the research and development for new cures. Other countries benefit, but don't pay their fair share. Crack down on the middlemen. End the free riding. Lower drug prices. Go to balancethescales.org to learn more. Paid for by Pharma.
Now, back to the show. So your work is so interconnected, so much so that you almost read my mind in what I was going to ask next, because you also talk a lot about purpose-driven branding, the subject of one of your books. And I wonder if, in looking back at that, how purpose-driven branding, where you warn about shallow purpose work, has changed in a landscape that, as you said, is kind of marred by skepticism.
Well, I think that the challenge is to get a signature program that'll help a business. and then to convince or to make sure that the audience does not view that effort as cynical, that you're just trying to help the business, which of course you are. So how do you avoid that? Well, you do that by making a long-term commitment, and you do that with some becoming a thought leader, to really understanding the problem, and to do things and issue programs or modify messages so that they know you really understand the program from different perspectives. And the third thing is you just exhibit passion, that you're relentless, that you're spending real resources and so on. And so if you nobody criticizes Thrivent for being involved with Habitat for Humanity, and
Right.
it is something that's involved their 2 million customers, and they divide them into brand communities defined by zip codes where they do social good, but they also mainly do this Habitat for Humanity effort. And nobody, I don't think anybody. Well, there's always, if you do a survey, 20% of people think black is white, but there's very few that's going to raise that issue. And um, and the same is true, like Dove Real Beauty, that's taken a $2.6 billion business and grew it to 6.5 in 17 years. But I think almost nobody criticizes Dove for being cynical and doing it just to make money. But that's, even though that's exactly what they did, and that was their motivation. But it was then accompanied by a real commitment, a real passion, a real knowledge, and again, it was accompanied by really, really gifted creative execution of their message, and in a way that's very appealing and likable. And so the skepticism is not a problem there.
So we've talked about at least 3 of your 18 books. It's cited 160,000 times. Do you ever see your own frameworks out in the wild and think, oh, that's not quite what I meant?
No, what really surprises me is to hear people tell me that I influenced their career and influenced their business because of my model. But well, first of all, I don't have much of an intimate look at how they're applying it, so it doesn't occur to me. But they just say they're applying it, and so I pat myself on the back. So yeah, so I don't have to really worry about that. And anyway, my key model that was developed the 2 key things I did in my first book, I said brand equity is not just awareness and image; it's also loyalty, and that turned out to be really, really pivotal. It really changed marketing, because now it was not something you can delegate to middle management and an agency. The second thing I did was I said, when you manage it, the agency a tendency just to create a 3-word phrase to motivate a campaign is not what branding is about. A brand is multidimensional, and I also said a brand is those dimensions are not preset for every brand. They will, you have to develop them for your brand, your context, and your problem. And those 2 fundamentals of my model, I think, have been adopted, and they use different terminology. They have a little, maybe the process has got some twists, but those basic philosophical goals, I think, are have been pretty well followed.
So let's flip it the other way. We've talked about the important ideas. Is there anything with branding that in all of your work, a branding buzzword, a concept that you happily banish and not write about anymore?
Well, I have had trouble with labels. I called my model brand identity model, Yeah, I didn't like that. And so I've changed it now to the brand vision model. And instead of brand elements, I have brand pillars. So, yeah, uh, if I had to do it over again, I would have had better labels at the outset. Um, but one decision I made, I think, was a good one. Instead of using the brand architecture term, I used brand portfolio strategy in my book on how do you manage a team of brands, and I think that was a good choice.
Yeah.
But
So speaking of revisiting things, coming full circle, we talked about Aaker on branding at the beginning, and revisiting a work is a big task. And I'm sure there were ups, downs along the way. Is there a point in the book that surprised and delighted you that you're eager for folks to see?
well, I think when I was reflecting in doing the book, I was really amazed at the extent to which the branding environment has changed, and the two dimensions I mentioned it earlier. We know this hyper dynamic and the hostile communication environment. I was really amazed at the extent that those two sort of challenges have grown and changed, and the implications they have for branding. I mean, the branding fundamentals haven't changed. We still have to do the same kind of thing: create a brand that differentiates, that resonates, that's intriguing, um, and we have to find ways to develop a brand relationship, and we have to search for disruptive innovators, and that's all the same. But those two changes have really changed things.
Yeah.
One of the things they've done is I got involved a little bit tangentially in the election last year, and what I observed, and at least personal hypothesis, but all these dozens and dozens and dozens of entities that were trying to do the same thing virtually um, were all over the map, and they're all over the map with ad hoc, uh, sort of win the day commercials that were really well done. But the next day they were forgotten, and what I think they none of them realized is that they weren't all by themselves. There was 99 other entities putting out all this clutter. So and almost none of them had really magical taglines.
Right.
If you except that Trump's "Let's Make America Great Again," which is brilliant, but the rest, most of the rest of them didn't have any. They'd take an issue, they run a great ad, and that would be it. And there was no visual image either, and there was no understanding about how to control a conversation, and
Right.
over time. And so I was so perturbed about that. I actually wrote a chapter in the new book called taglines and visual symbols, and how
Mhm.
important they are to
Yeah.
uh, to manage not only the role of your brand in somebody's memory, but also the process. You know what you attend to, and how you process information, and without a brand, without a tagline or without a visual symbol, instead of reinforcing and so on, you starting from scratch each time. It you have almost no impact. And they spent billions and billions on that, and it was very, very frustrating. So I don't know to what extent that also occurs in business and in nonprofit branding. I don't think it's a problem there, but at least in the political world,
Right.
I thought that's true. And also it I think it is true everywhere that if you can get a great tagline and visual symbol, it's a home run. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just such a difference. And if you have a bad one, it's it's debilitating. It sort
Yeah.
of confuses and clouds. And if you have an okay one, then it's still probably going to help. But if you have a home run, um, the BMW thing in the ultimate driving machine. If you have a home run, it really defines, not only expresses your communication objective, but it really defines the whole discussion.
Well, and those distilled symbols, icons, taglines, I forget whose work described those as being important because they offer people handles that they can hold on to, that they can grab onto, and it's easy to remember. And so I think that's a really important point. And you see it in politics, but I would almost argue, kind of coming back to what we were saying before, that there is a programmatic approach to marketing messaging that sometimes has us slice and dice different pieces for this exact audience, and we lose sight of how it connects to that bigger story in a way that gives the audience a meaningful handle and a differentiator for the brand as well.
Yeah.
Whenever we chat, I am always given several examples of brands that make me smile, like Thrivent and Dove. I am now going to ask you one more time for a brand, David, that has made you smile recently.
Well, I'm a student of the Dove's Real Beauty program, and now it's kind of an old story, but I really admire that, and I had to smile with the Hillman's mayonnaise and make taste not waste about food, and when they had this linebacker named Mayo, it was his real name actually, and he was tackling a grandmother, and it was just so humorous. But I think my favorite story right now is, and I virtually never use examples that occur in the company I'm associated with, profit, because I don't want to be involved in any hint of using info and worrying about what's disclosable or not. But however, the current campaign that Profit is orchestrating for UBS, it's about banking is our craft. And I just think that's a brilliant metaphor. I mean, you think about how hard it is to communicate banking. I mean, first of all, who cares about banking? And it's the world's most boring subject. And if it wasn't for insurance, it would be the worst. And uh, uh, and yet this just talks about their message of, they have a certain culture that they are concerned about what they do, and they have a culture that allows them to do it right, and they're like a craftsperson, and then in the execution they've got all these craft people, jewelry cutter, watchmaker, something, and or a dancer, and or an athlete, and they talk about the relationship of these people to their craft, and it's just I think a really great metaphor, and so that's the one that catches my eye right now.
A metaphor and a micro dose of story there in just a word and that describes the approach.
Yeah.
David, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Well, I blog on LinkedIn, and so if you go to LinkedIn, you'll see. Right now I have a weekly LinkedIn post that talks about a learning from Aaker on branding second edition, and we're probably going to run that for 15 or 20 weeks. So there's 15 learnings from the brand. One of the first ones was the history of brand equity, how the brand equity kind of emerged in the early 90s. And another one is branded energizers, how you get them and why they're important. And so anyway, that's there's that, and then there is there's a the website. There is a website for the book, but it's readily available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and so forth.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. David Aaker, thanks for being on brand with us once again.
Well, thanks for having me, Nick. It's always a pleasure.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkins-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkinsporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.